Today we're talking 1992 Libertads. Coming up next.
Your winner by unanimous decision, and still World Heavyweight Champion of the World, the Mexican Libertad! Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Titty Hunter!
Before we talk about the 92s, I want to talk shop for a little bit. It's been quite a few days since I last got to record a video. You got work, you got life getting in the way of the titty hunting, but I'm right back at it. First, I've talked about this group before. I want to feature it again. LibertadCoins subreddit in Reddit. Very cool place. I don't know who created this, but I love the moniker Titty Thursday. And folks, I guess it's a good day to showcase that. If Thursday was yesterday, it's a good day to showcase Libertads. So you'll see a lot of Titty Thursdays. Really cool thing. Love it. But one of the first things I wanted to focus in on, because it is still the big chatter, it is the 2025 release of the 1 ounce mint state / brilliant uncirculated release. And so everyone's still talking about it. You know, the big buzz was that, there's only going to be 300 coins. And so something drew my attention. This is on Banco de Mexico's website. You can go there yourself, Banco de Mexico, and they have a PDF that shows you who are their authorized international distributors. And what you have here is internationally, you have 19 distributors. You scroll through here and there are 19 distributors. So the first distributor, and it was a U.S. distributor, it was this Pat Stovall. And he was the one that put out that coin article where they did a little interview on him. And he said, it was the whole FOMO, there's only going to be 300 of these made. But what was interesting, Pat also has an email distribution list of folks who have bought from him in the past. And he mentioned how he was being allocated 20 of them. So Pat, let's compare Pat. You're stacking up Pat. You're going to compare him to Scottsdale is much bigger. You got AppMex, they're much bigger. A-Mark's publicly traded. These are much bigger places. So if Pat is being allocated 20 and you got 19 distributors, just assume they all get 20 each. You're already at 380. Something doesn't smell right. And it's what I told you in an earlier video. Until Banco de Mexico publishes it, and what's not making sense is there's already buzz that some distributors have the coins on hand. Something doesn't make sense. It almost sounds like dealers had to agree to something contractually to just stir the pot, get folks excited of a shortage, and then eventually just say, oh, but we actually minted more. But, Banco has not minted any stats on it, and we're pretty late into 2025. And the late in 2025 is a phenomenon that you trace back to COVID in 2020, because these used to get released earlier in the year and a cadence more aligned with your Chinese silver pandas, your silver kookaburras, your Britannias, your American silver eagles. And so since 2020, there's just been this irregular cadence, and the silver coins just get released later and later in the year. And there is a hypothesis. I talked about Bullion Cat, and Bullion Cat was going into Banco's website and gathering stats on not mintages, but coins, Libertads that they're putting by year into circulation. And so it just means that the year that coins were put into circulation. What we don't have line of sight into is which minted years are being circulated for that year. That's not clear. And something that stood out, I don't have that handy, but something that stood out to me, it almost seems like Banco still has a lot of 2024s they're trying to move. And so perhaps they're just delaying, creating a FOMO for the 2025 to somehow move more of those 2024 longs. But we'll see what happens. Until they publish something, I'm telling you, I do not trust that 300 mintage number. The other thing I wanted to talk about, there was a question that came up on LibertadCoins, and the question was, as of right now, which specific year do folks feel like is the most overlooked, potentially undervalued? And my answer to that, funny enough, because I've had already a couple discussions in prior videos, it's the 2007. And why I say that is I've been noticing that the 2018s, not the antique versions, not the 40,000 vintage one, but the regular BU MS series, 260 of them, and the prices have been really taking off. Meanwhile, they're pretty much like an MS-70 of 2018, which there's plenty of them. There's thousands. Uh, the price is pretty much overtaking an MS-69 for 2000. And I just feel either we're going to say the 2018 is overvalued or we're going to say that the 2007 is undervalued. And I think it's the latter. And I say that because I think I told you the dynamic I've noticed with the Libertad market is prior to when I started collecting, when I showed up in 2021, that 2020 COVID uh stimmy checks type of demand that initiated it, that brought in a huge surge into Libertad pricing, and then it kind of just backpedaled, eased off a little bit, and that's kind of when I showed up before kind of like the next wave up. And so I had mentioned I bought my first 2007 MS69. I paid over $600 for it. And right now, and I'll show you the comps, we're sitting at an MS69. There's one that went on the 20th for 360. Another MS69 here on the 14th for 360 again. That's a proof. You had an MS69 from PCGS at 409, an NGC one. Oh, that's a 68 one for 285. So I paid more than double essentially. And then I had mentioned the second one I purchased was a year or so after that, and I got that for just over 200, another MS69. So I do believe this one was going to be up and coming again, and it will go to 600 plus again. I do believe that'll happen. I mean, let's compare quickly the population stats on NGC, just looking at 2007. So there's no 70s, but you have 243 69s. And I mentioned those 2018s are like shooting up in price, but look at 2018. You have pretty much like 3,000 70s and 1,400 69s. So I think folks are overlooking the year 2007, which basically ranks at number 7 in terms of scarcity for the rarest years of Libertads. 2018 is right after it, but that's at 260, and we got 2007 at 200,000. And one final note before we dive right into the mintage on the 1992s. I want to emphasize it as much as I can that everyone's cognizant of it, but that for most years, less than 1% of the mintage has been graded by both of the grading companies combined. So a lot can change. Bully Cat was just talking about that today. A couple of us in a group chat, and he's saying out of nowhere, a bunch of 2011s are just showing up, and a bunch of rolls are being sold. So just like that, a bunch of inventory can just show up onto the market, and the next thing you know, people are buying up those rolls, and they're perhaps getting them graded. Something else that stood out that just happened this week is there used to be a scarce amount of MS-70 grades for the 2010, and that commanded pretty high prices, over $1,000 for those. And out of nowhere, let's quickly take a look in the chart. 2010, we suddenly have now 270s. So I do believe for the short term, before new collectors hop on board, we're going to see a price correction there. So that's why it's just so important to understand that there's a whole lot of mintage and so few of the minted numbers have been graded, so you can get price fluctuations. So now let's dive into the 92. 1992, allegedly the highest minted year for the 1 ounce silver mint state, brilliant uncirculated, almost 2.5 million. But what stands out to me immediately is just the number of graded for being such an allegedly abundant coin. And at 2.5 million, you'd figured there'd be many more graded. And it's just highlighted here, comparing the 1985 with 2 million minted. And NGC already has over 11,000 graded, and PCGS pretty much 2,600. So it's just not making sense how do we have 2.5 million on 1992, but so few graded at NGC and PCGS. And the market prices themselves, if we take a look at some of the 92 comps, and the 1985 raws right now, and they're so abundant, they're at about pretty much upper 40s to 50 for singles on eBay. So this 92 went for 53, which is not a bad price for just buying a single, nothing else. But typically the prices are higher than that. And on the 85, they're not this high yet. I do believe as silver price takes off, it's going to get higher. But I'm just showing you how the 1992, for allegedly having 2.5 million, the prices aren't making sense. They're going towards $100 when if they're so abundant, they should be. This one, for example, went for 48, and this, so they should be closer to 50 for being so abundant, just raw, regular, without considering its grading quality and whatnot. So I've shown you this chart before for earlier years, and now graphically, this really stands out. Black dotted line, your mintage or your alleged mintage. And then suddenly the bars down here are the total population graded for NGC in blue bar, and then red bar, the total population graded for PCGS. And 1992 kind of really just sticks out, the black dotted line up here at 2.5 million coming across, but the total population that has been graded, small short bars, very similar to prior years. So that kind of doesn't make sense. What does now start to stand out, what I've graphed here in blue and red lines, is the top pops. Not just top pops. I would say the top grades. I include instances of 69s and 70s for an NGC's grading in the blue line, and in the red line, we're talking about PCGS. So 69 and 70s. So the quality control era of just bad quality control of the 80s, way down here, just almost nothing. And now we're starting to see an increase. The quality is increasing because the grading companies, they're both handing out 69s and 70s for 1992. And we already started to see that increase in trend for 1991. The 1991, and then the Type 2 even more, because that was sort of like the introduction of the new small onza font that we talked about last time. Let's look at the population reports for the graded coins at both NGC and PCGS. What you'll notice, there's 2 entries on the NGC side, and I'm showcasing 2 coins here on the bottom screen. And this is essentially a new variety for that year. Again, this is not a variety per se that was intended. This was essentially poor minting process. And we're going to zoom in later in the video, and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about when we say missing feather detail. We'll kind of zoom in on that, and I could show you that. But we're at real time, we're at over 500 graded for the regular 92, and then there has been 85 graded with the variety plus label of missing feather detail. Quite interesting. The 170 for the missing feather detail, that was actually somebody at LibertadCoins. They posted it, the picture, on Reddit just recently. So Rick Jones, if you're interested, that guy has it. So Rick Jones, I've mentioned it a while back, at least in one video. He has the highest ranking in the NGC registry and the PCGS registry for highest graded coins in the whole MS mint state brilliant uncirculated set. And he does not have this one. and it's 1 of 1 right now. And let's take a look at the PCGS side. And like I've mentioned in the past, PCGS, it doesn't acknowledge the grand majority of these poor quality control errors. They're not true varieties per se. And so in 1992, they only have 1 entry. And so far, they have 662 graded, and they have 170. So before we zoom in on the coins to see what missing feather detail is exactly, because you can see it much clearer when you're zoomed in, here's just showcasing that poster named Sudden Objective 700. And this is that one, that single graded missing feathers detail, MS70. So just before I zoom in to the naked eye, when we talk about missing feather detail, we're talking about the angel's left wing and us looking to the right. So it's this side on both coins that we're talking about. And basically what missing feathers detail means is the detail, in particular here on this feather, is much less than the detail on this one. So left side, the ridges are a little deeper. And on the right side, this one, the missing feathers, they're not as detailed, the ridges. So now let's zoom in. So here we're zoomed in on my regular 92. Not a good minted coin in general. And as you look at the wings, looking at the detail of this wing, let's look at the detail of the other wing. And quite honestly, someone could say this is also missing feathers detail. And now let's swap in the missing feathers detail, and just as bad general press, but the wing is slightly worse on the wings. This is the one where it's typically more pronounced on, but even the other wing, just a lot of flat space. But even the one without the label that doesn't say missing feathers, quite honestly, it had a lot of missing detail on the feather. And like I said, when you want attribution for these types of varieties on the coin, you have to pay now $20. So there is some more detail, but still pretty bad. And so missing detail on the feathers is just the detail, the ridges that we typically see on these wings. They're missing. So even my regular one, you could say it's missing feather detail. I would just have to resubmit, pay an additional $20 to get that variety plus designation on the label. But that's essentially what we mean by the missing feather detail. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for 1993 next.